Hello again. When Black Power activist Stokely Carmichael coined the expression institutional racism in 1967, he probably didn't realise what he was starting. For the next 30 years or so, institutional racism was one of those weird phrases which floated around, chiefly in academic circles, such as the sociology departments at certain famous left-wing and progressive universities. But the average person in Britain did not encounter it. Then in 1999, the Mcferson report on the murder of Stephen Lawrence was published, and this had the effect of turbocharging the idea of institutional racism and making it very much a thing in the national consciousness. Although originally it was only the Metropolitan Police which was claimed to be institutionally racist, in no time at all schools, in fact the entire education system, was also said to be suffering from this awful malady, along with the National Health Service, local authorities, banks, the Girl Guides, and every other public body, voluntary organisation and business in the country. Institutional racism was very much the flavour of the new century. However, all these mad crazes have their season before they fade and die. Whether it's tulip mania, the South Sea bubble, or institutional racism, none of them lasts forever, and all the signs are that the institutional racism business may well be on the way out. I thought that it would be interesting to look at one or two of the places which were widely trumpeted as being institutionally racist in Britain. The best way of doing so, and showing which way the wind is blowing, is to look at an aspect of the National Health Service, which was at one time said to be rife with institutional racism, and also the British educational system, which is currently said still to be in the grip of racism, which leads to unfavourable outcomes for black students. Despite every effort at improving the academic outcome for black students, there remains a considerable gap between them and other ethnicities in this country, such as white people. In America, this is known as the achievement gap. Those of Chinese heritage and those whose families have their origin in the Indian subcontinent do not suffer from this particular form of institutional racism, of course. At A-levels, black pupils do considerably less well than other groups, and they're much less likely to get first or upper seconds after attending university. I give a couple of links to this in the description to this video. Then too, there is the fact that black school pupils are far more likely to end up in pupil referral units than other ethnicities, and also more likely to be excluded from school. Black pupils are 5 times more likely to be sent to pupil referral units than other ethnicities. All these things are, of course, at the moment attributed to institutional racism. The difficulty lies, it seems, not with black students, but with a system run in the main by middle-class white people. The fault lies in a racist system, not in anything at all to do with black students or their families. I think it fair to say that this is still in many quarters the orthodox explanation for what is seen. This situation is precisely similar to that seen with older black people and mental health, although one hears rather less about this lately than was once the case. People of black Caribbean heritage in the United Kingdom are 9 times as likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia as white people. Those of black or African origin are 6 times as likely to receive such a diagnosis. Britain's Mental Health Act makes provision for people to be detained compulsorily in a psychiatric hospital if they are a danger to themselves or others. This is commonly known as being sectioned, alluding to the relevant section of the Act under which the action is taken. It has long been noticed that black people were far more likely to be sectioned than white people. They're 4 times as likely to be sectioned and 10 times more likely to be the subject of a community treatment order, whereby they live outside a hospital but are still subject to compulsory treatment. The same phenomenon has been observed in the United States, of course, I provide references in the description to this video. In 2021, British Health Secretary Matt Hancock suggested that this situation was caused by institutional racism, saying that this is a significant moment in how we support those with serious mental health issues, which will give people more autonomy over their care and will tackle disparities for all who access services, in particular for people from minority ethnic backgrounds. Just as with the disproportionate number of black students at pupil referral units was caused by an institutionally racist system, so too with the number of black people diagnosed with or sectioned because of psychosis. It was nothing at all to do with the black people and everything to do with the system. In 2018, the journal Psychiatric Genetics published a paper which revealed that the Polygenic risk score, or PRS for schizophrenia, for those of African origin was very much higher than it was for white people from Europe or North America. So great was the difference between the PRS for different ancestral groups that in the case of Africans and Europeans, they hardly even overlapped. There was some doubt as to how best to interpret these results. It's not necessary to go too deeply into the pros and cons of the argument. The fact remains that the genetic heritage of black people show different levels of risk for schizophrenia than white people have. This sheds light on why schizophrenia is apparently found more frequently in Britain and the United States among black people than white. It may not be the whole explanation, but it's certainly a part of it. In 2015, the British science magazine Nature described David Reich of the Harvard Medical School as one of the 10 people who matter in all fields of science. His special area of expertise is ancient DNA. We looked, I've been talking about the inherent differences between black people and white. I've mentioned this before many times on this channel. Reich did a lot of research and found that this affected the disposition towards prostate cancer. African Americans have the highest rates of prostate cancer in the world. He wrote a book called Who We Are and How We Got Here, which was published in 2018, and it contained some startling admissions hidden away in accounts of Neanderthal DNA and different genomes associated with various ethnic groups. In the chapter entitled The Genomics of Race and Identity, Reich has this to say: I have deep sympathy for the concern that genetic discoveries about differences among populations may be misused to justify racism. But it is precisely because of this sympathy that I am worried that people who deny the possibility of substantial biological differences among populations across a range of traits are digging themselves into an indefensible position, one which will not survive the onslaught of science. He goes on to discuss, among other things, work which showed a very strong link between certain genes and the likelihood of a person studying at university. The implication is very plain. Just as some sequences of genes can indicate clearly a predisposition towards cancer of the prostate, so too can others show a propensity for academic achievement. This is a stunning challenge to the orthodox position of those who insist that race and ethnicity are merely skin deep. This then is the situation now. Rather than white racism, the extraordinarily high rate of psychosis among people of African heritage is almost certainly a matter of genetics. In other words, it's the people, rather than any racist system, which is the main factor. With the discovery that using genetics it is possible to predict the likelihood of somebody attending university, we consider the possibility that institutional racism causing black underachievement academically may also be a lot of nonsense. The advocates of institutional racism as an explanation for many things observed in modern Britain are in effect fighting a rearguard action against science. I'm bound to observe that when ideology clashes with science in this way, there can be little doubt as to the victor. at least in the long term,